Two black teens stepped into a car showroom filled with curiosity and respect. But just moments later, they were shown the door, judged not for their actions but for how they looked. The following day, their millionaire parent arrived. Not to raise his voice, but to make sure the truth wasn't ignored. It was a sweltering afternoon in Brookridge, one of those dry, slow-burning days where the sun presses down on everything. Jalen Rivers had just wrapped up track drills, his gray tee soaked in sweat as he strolled beside his sister Zuri into the parking lot of Crestline Motors. They weren't up to anything. In fact, Jalen had been buzzing about this visit for days. "I'm not saying I'll drive out with a car," he grinned, adjusting the strap on his gym bag. "But maybe something secondhand just to scope it out before my birthday." Zuri laughed, tossing her braids off her shoulder. "You really think Dad's letting you roll into school in a shiny coupe? Dream on." Jalen chuckled but didn't break stride. "Let me dream, at least." The lot was calm. Silver cars lined in neat rows under sun-bleached banners. Glass doors shimmered in the heat as the siblings stepped inside like any other pair with big hopes and honest questions. Inside, the cold air hit hard, a stark contrast to the blazing heat outside. A man, maybe in his 50s, dressed in a pale, button-down, lifted his head from behind the counter. His gaze landed on Jalen, then drifted to Zuri. They were dressed neat, Jalen in sporty clothes, Zuri in a casual dress and sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Still, the man stood abruptly. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice stiff. Jalen stepped up, polite as always. "Yeah, just browsing a bit, thinking about a used car. My birthday's coming up next month." "Do you have an appointment?" the man cut in, already making his way toward them. Jalen paused. "No, we don't allow unaccompanied minors in the showroom," he interrupted, tossing a quick look at a coworker across the floor. "Store policy." Zuri's expression shifted. "We're not even touching anything. Still, this isn't a hangout," his voice now colder. "You can check out the website if you're interested." The silence hung heavy. Jalen started to speak, then didn't. Zuri clutched the strap of her bag. "We'll go," Jalen said softly. And they did. No arguments. No scene. Just the slow walk back across burning asphalt, Zuri holding her breath the whole way. Only once they'd sunk into the back seat of the rideshare did she finally speak. "That man looked at us like we didn't matter." Jalen gave the smallest nod, jaw tight. He tapped at his phone, checked the ETA, then stared out the window. Zuri studied his reflection in the glass. She hated that look. Not quiet, but contained. She'd seen it once on their father's face. "You're not going to tell him, are you?" Jalen didn't answer right away. "I'm not sure," he said eventually. "It's not like the guy screamed or anything. He just didn't want us there. Still felt wrong to me," Zuri muttered, leaning back. The rest of the ride passed in silence. They didn't need to explain it. They both understood. But the man at Crestline Motors had no idea who he'd just sent away. And by the next sunrise, he was going to learn. Their car wound through the hills of Oak Ridge Heights, where homes grew larger, quieter, and more spaced out the higher you climbed. Inside the black SUV, Zuri sat arms crossed, still burning. Jalen remained wordless, phone in hand, screen dark. His thoughts were far away as their home came into view. A sleek, white and stone house tucked behind a subtle gate. Not loud, not flashy, but the kind of place that whispers wealth earned with time or wisdom. Their father, Julian Rivers, had built his fortune from the ground up. What began as a small electronics repair shop in Redwood Springs became a booming tech firm specializing in digital security. These days, his name popped up in industry articles and innovation panels. But in their neighborhood, he was simply Julian. The kids entered through the side door, dropping their bags on the bench by the kitchen hallway. The house carried the quiet scent of cedar and crisp linen, the smell of home. From the dining table, Mrs. Laura, their longtime housekeeper, looked up while folding laundry. "Hey, you two? Everything okay?" Zuri gave a faint, "Yeah." Jalen said nothing. From deeper in the house, a familiar voice called out, "Jalen!" Their father appeared moments later, barefoot, wearing a navy polo, tablet in hand. "You're back early," Jalen shrugged. Didn't stay long. Julian immediately noticed the way his son's shoulders sagged. The glance he exchanged with Zuri said even more. "What happened?" Silence. Julian set the tablet down, crossing his arms. "Jalen?" Zuri sighed. "Some guy at the car place didn't want us inside." Julian's brow furrowed. "Which place?" "Crescent Auto Center," Jalen said. "Over on Parkway Drive." "And what did he say?" Jalen rubbed the back of his neck. "Said we couldn't look around, that they don't let minors in alone. Acted like we were just loitering." Julian didn't move right away. His gaze narrowed slightly, not in anger, but with quiet intensity, the kind that meant his mind was already planning 3 steps ahead. "What did you do?" "We left," Jalen said. "Didn't want to make it a thing." That landed hard. Julian stepped into the kitchen and poured a glass of water, handing it to his son before speaking again. "You made the right call. I mean that." Jalen nodded slowly, but then his father sat at the kitchen stool and looked him straight in the eyes. "Listen to me. You are no less than anyone else. Doesn't matter if you walk in wearing sneakers or a suit. If you carry yourself with dignity and someone still sees you as a problem, that's their failure, not yours." Zuri leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, eyes locked on her father. Julian's voice dropped lower. "But know this too. Silence isn't always noble. Sometimes when people get away with small acts of disrespect, they do it again. To the next person, and the next?" Jalen swallowed. "So what are you gonna do?" Julian didn't answer at first. He glanced at both of them, then stood up and pulled his phone from his pocket. "I'm going to make a call." Zuri blinked. "To who?" "Whoever's running that place," he replied, walking out of the room. "Tomorrow morning." The rest of the evening moved quietly. No yelling, no pacing. Julian cooked dinner like usual. Grilled sea bass, green beans, wild rice. They ate together, but something in the air had changed. Not rage, purpose. That night, Jalen stared at the ceiling for a long time. He didn't know what kind of call his dad had in mind, but something told him. It would speak louder than any outburst. Across town, the man at the auto center had no idea a storm was already forming. Crescent Auto opened at 9 a.m. sharp. By 8:45, staff began arriving, keys clinking, coffee cups steaming, sunglasses still on. Just another Monday. Derek Harlow, assistant sales manager, leaned on the front counter, iced espresso in hand, scrolling mindlessly through his phone. He scrolled through his inbox, barely recognizing half the names anymore. People came and went all the time. It was that kind of place. If you could sell, you stuck around, and Derek knew how to sell. At 9:03, the first customer of the day arrived. A deep blue Rolls-Royce Phantom eased into the lot, gleaming under the Westbridge sun. It didn't pull into a parking spot. It didn't wait near the back. It rolled smoothly to the front entrance and stopped. No one stepped out right away. Derek glanced at the receptionist, then walked around the front desk. "You got an appointment on the books?" She shook her head, eyes fixed on the luxury car. Then, the door opened. Out stepped a tall man, dark blazer, pressed trousers, shoes shining like chrome. His movements were steady, unrushed. Every step measured. He opened the glass door, paused just inside, and spoke in a calm but clear voice. "Good morning. I'd like to speak with your manager." Derek hesitated. I'm the assistant manager. How can I help?" The man, looked him dead in the eye. "You're not who I came for." That's when the general manager, Kyle Larson, emerged from a side office. He was tall, a little flushed, always carrying more stress than needed. "Morning," Kyle said quickly. "I'm Kyle. Can I ask what brings you in?" The man pulled a card from his inside pocket and handed it over. Kyle read the name slowly. Julian Rivers, founder and chairman, LNR Global, his face drained of color. Wow. Sir, I wasn't expecting... Imagine you weren't, Julian replied, taking another step forward. "I won't be long." Kyle gestured toward his office, eyes darting nervously toward Derek. "Sure. Let's talk in here." But Julian didn't move. "No need for a private space. This is a public showroom. What I have to say will only take a moment." Kyle nodded stiffly, visibly uncomfortable. "Go ahead." Julian glanced around the room. "Yesterday, 2 teenagers walked into this place. One was my son, the other my daughter." Kyle swallowed. "I see. They were told they couldn't look around, that this place wasn't for them, that they needed to leave." "Sir, Julian raised a hand. "I'm not here for an argument. I'm not here for a refund. I didn't lose anything yesterday, but you did. You lost a chance to treat 2 young people with respect, something they were taught to offer, even when it isn't returned. A few employees nearby started pretending to tidy up, papers, counters, anything, but they were listening. My children aren't troublemakers," Julian continued. "They're smart, kind, raised with values. They don't need your approval. But they did deserve to be treated as human beings, not as threats." Derek stared down at his shoes. The receptionist had gone completely still. Kyle cleared his throat. "Mr. Rivers, I'm not asking for an apology," Julian cut in. "Apologies are simple. What matters is what you believe when nobody's watching. It's about the choices you make when you think no one will ever call you out." He paused, letting the quiet hang in the air. "Because next time, it might not be my kids. It might be someone else. Someone without a father who can make a few calls, and they'll leave this place with a story you'll never hear. But they'll carry it for life." Julian turned to leave, then stopped, one hand on the glass door. He didn't look back. "You can sell luxury without being small. I hope you figure out how." Outside, a few people had started to gather, 2 recording on their phones. A local reporter, tipped off. A woman holding a microphone. Julian hadn't called anyone. The news had simply moved. The air outside had changed. Not the temperature, but the energy. Julian stepped onto the pavement with composed, deliberate calm. His expression didn't shift at the sight of the onlookers. Among them, 2 university students watching it unfold. Off to the side, a few college students stood quietly, phones raised, whispering back and forth. A reporter from Channel 9 Westline News was already speaking into her mic, unsure if she was even on air yet. Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't search for a platform. He stopped just outside the showroom, adjusted the cuff of his blazer, and began to speak. "I wasn't planning on saying anything today, but I know how these things go. If I stay silent, someone else will try to speak for me." He lifted his gaze, scanning the handful of faces watching. "Yesterday, my son Jalen and my daughter Zuri came here in the afternoon. They weren't loud. They didn't touch anything they shouldn't have. They walked in with curiosity and dreams, like any young person should." His voice was steady. Not loud, but so calm, people leaned in to catch every word. And yet, they were asked to leave. Not for breaking a rule, not for causing trouble, but because someone looked at them and decided they didn't belong. They were treated like a problem before they even spoke. One of the students exhaled shakily behind the camera. Julian continued, "I've spent my life building something meaningful, and I've taught my children that success doesn't live in your wallet. It lives in your choices, in how you treat people when there's no audience watching." He paused, not for effect, but because his next words needed space. Yesterday, someone looked at my children and didn't see who they are. They saw what they assumed, and they dismissed them. You don't have to yell to be disrespectful. Sometimes it's enough to make someone feel small in a place they were excited to walk into. Inside the dealership, Kyle stood by the glass, hands buried deep in his pockets. Julian gave a brief glance in his direction before turning back to the growing crowd. I'm not here to cancel anyone. That's not what I believe in. I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just exhausted, tired of seeing good kids treated like criminals before they've done anything wrong. That kind of experience sticks, and if no one speaks out, it keeps repeating itself. More bystanders had gathered near the curb. Across the street, a delivery guy tilted his sunglasses to get a better look. I came today because my kids didn't deserve what happened to them, and because I want them to know. When something is wrong, you don't just swallow it. You face it with clarity, with self-respect, and without letting it turn you into what you're standing against. Julian stepped back toward the Rolls-Royce, one hand on the door handle. One more thing. My kids walked out of here yesterday with their heads held high. That says everything about them, and nothing about the man who tried to make them. Feel small. He opened the car door and got in without another word. No cheers, no applause, just silence. People were processing what they'd heard, what they'd seen, and what it meant. Inside the dealership, Derek sat down slowly. The receptionist had tears in her eyes and couldn't explain why. Kyle stood stiffly by the window, arms locked at his sides. But even he knew the narrative had already slipped away. By that afternoon, the first clip hit social media, then came Instagram. Then the evening news, and the story started to move on its own. A blurry vertical video, recorded by freshman Tori Clemens, had already hit 2 million views on X. Her caption read, "This man walked into a dealership that disrespected his kids and handled it with more grace than I've ever seen. I'm honestly speechless." But it wasn't just being shared. People were analyzing it, pausing frames, zooming in, debating his tone, fighting in comment threads under every repost. A woman from Redwood Springs left a comment. "Julian Rivers fixed my mom's laptop in 2002 and wouldn't accept a dime. He's been built different since day one." Others weren't so generous. One anonymous account, profile picture of a flag and eagle, wrote, "Why didn't the kids just say who their dad was? Sounds like they wanted attention." And just like that, the situation exploded. Morning shows jumped on it. Good Morning Mesa ran a full segment. Tech mogul confronts discrimination at local auto dealership. Within hours, the dealership's online ratings tanked. From a 4.3 to a 2.0, dozens of one-star reviews flooded in. "Rude staff, treated my teen like a criminal. If you're not in a blazer, don't bother walking in. They'll ask you to leave before you even speak." But it wasn't just strangers weighing in. Local advocacy groups began echoing the story, calling for deeper conversations about bias, assumptions, and youth perception. Meanwhile, the dealership issued a statement, a generic 2-paragraph note, posted on their website and Instagram. "We regret the recent incident at our location and are reviewing all internal policies. We remain committed to providing a welcoming environment for all." The comment section said it all. "You're only sorry because it went public. How about reviewing your staff, not just your rules?" This apology has the warmth of a traffic ticket. Behind the scenes, Kyle Larson was in panic mode. He'd called 2 different PR firms. Both said the same thing: keep quiet. Stay invisible. Do not try to spin it. But the internet wasn't interested in spin. People wanted real talk. They wanted transparency. They wanted names. At home, Jalen and Zuri sat on the couch, phones buzzing nonstop. Some texts came from friends. Others were from total strangers. Zuri held up one that made them both laugh. "Girl, is that your dad on the news? Tell him to run for mayor or something. I'm screaming." But the funny ones were quickly followed by harder messages. Why? Didn't you just walk away? Not everything's about race. He probably thought you skipped school. Billionaires want sympathy now? Jalen stared at his screen, jaw tight. Zuri nudged him. Don't read that mess. He didn't answer, still scrolling. Julian walked in carrying 2 mugs of tea. Phone's down, he said. Just for now. Jalen hesitated, then slowly placed his phone face down. Zuri followed. Their father sat across from them, leaning in slightly. You two didn't ask for any of this. But sometimes, your story ends up bigger than just you, Zuri frowned. But we didn't even do anything. We just walked in. I know, Julian said. That's what makes it real. You did everything right, and still someone saw you wrong. Jalen stared at the table. Is it always going to be like that? Julian let the silence breathe. No, he said at last. But it will happen again. And when it does, you choose who you want to be in that moment. Outside, reporters still lingered down the block. Inside, something deeper than frustration was beginning to settle in. It wasn't anger anymore. It was awareness. And awareness doesn't fade. The sun dipped low behind Holleridge Hill, casting long shadows across the backyard. It had been 2 long, quiet days since Julian spoke outside that showroom. 2 days of headlines, DMs, opinions. But behind the hedges, there was stillness. Julian stood at the grill, turning salmon fillets with quiet, steady rhythm. Jalen sat at the patio table, elbows on his knees, gazing out over the yard. Zuri leaned against the railing, her face tucked inside her hoodie. No cameras, no questions. Just us, she said softly. You know, Julian began, still focused, on the grill. When I was 16, I saved for 2 years to buy my first car, a '94 red hatchback. Paint faded, manual windows, had to crank them down myself. Zuri peeked out from her hoodie. You said it had no AC, right? None at all, Julian laughed. Summers in Redwood nearly roasted me alive. But I loved that car. Not because it was fancy, but because I worked for it. Jalen finally turned to face him. You ever get treated like we did? Like judged just for showing up? Julian nodded slowly. More times than I can count. Walked into stores, got followed. Applied for loans, laughed right out of the bank. One time I got refused service at a diner in Mesa Ridge, had my code books in my lap. Didn't argue. Just got up and left. But why didn't you say anything back? Jalen asked. Like you did now? Julian flipped a fillet on the grill. Because back then, I didn't think my voice mattered. I believed that staying quiet was the only way to move ahead. He paused, the sizzle filling the space. But I was wrong. That's the thing, son. You swallow disrespect long enough, you start to forget what it feels like to be truly seen. And I never wanted that. For you or your sister. Zuri came over and sat beside her brother. Well, she said, you definitely made sure we got seen. Julian looked at both of them. Being seen isn't the end of it. You've got to be ready for what comes next. The praise, the pushback. The folks who admire you for speaking up and the ones who'll resent you for it. Jalen stared down at his hands. I didn't even want to make a scene. I just wanted to look at some cars. I know, Julian said. And that's what makes it matter. You weren't putting on a show. You were just living your life, and someone didn't like what that looked like. They all sat quietly for a moment. I'm proud of you, Julian added. Both of you. You didn't yell, didn't try to prove anything. You stayed grounded in who you are. Zuri shrugged. Didn't really feel brave. It's not supposed to, Julian said. Courage is quiet most of the time. It's just refusing to back down from being decent in a world that often isn't. A long silence hung in the air. Then Zuri smirked. So, are we still car shopping or what? Julian smiled. Took you long enough to ask. Jalen sat up. Wait, seriously? Julian tossed a set of keys across the table. They landed with a soft clink right by Jalen's hand. Check the garage. Tomorrow, he said. But remember, it's not about the car. It's about who you become while driving it. That matters more than anything with an engine. Zuri nudged her brother, teasing. You better not crash it on day one. Please, Jalen grinned. I'm driving like it's made of crystal. Julian chuckled, and for the first time in days, the weight began to lift. Some stories end in anger, others in silence. But this one ends in growth. Sometimes the strongest way to fight back is to stay standing. Calm, true, and visible. If this story moved you, share it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge, connect, and remind us who we truly are.